And I want to confess the complexity for me of this message. And complex in the sense that I sense that there will be a resistance. And so I want you to pray with me as we plow through this. I want to teach about removing our masks. And so I want us to spend some time here in 2 Corinthians. If you notice, I also reference Exodus chapter 34. I do that because the text does that. So I want to spend time here, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, where we touched on a little bit last week. I want to touch on it again this week. I want to begin, let's begin at verse 7. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 7. Paul is kind of complex because he's running a contrast, if you will, between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Really not even the Old Testament, New Testament, between the Old Testament and liberty of grace. He's saying if what was happening with Moses in the Old Testament was so glorious, and it was, how much more glorious would things be as we walk in a liberty of grace? And what he does to help people understand the complexity of what he's teaching is he draws an example of what happened with Moses in Exodus chapter 34. So I want to spend a few minutes over there so we can clearly understand what he's saying. And so 2 Corinthians chapter 3, and if you notice, the pericope says the glory of the new covenant, meaning the New Testament, meaning the grace we have in the New Testament, the grace we have in Christ. And he says, but if the ministry of death written and engraved on stones was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance, which glory was passing away, how will the ministry of the Spirit not be more glorious? So let's go back so we understand what he's saying. The ministry of death written and engraved on the stone. So you're talking about the 10 Commandments. The reason is the ministry of death is because you can't keep them. And I'm going to teach this in a minute so that it wasn't life-giving. And I'm going to teach that in a minute. He says, but it was still glorious, so much to the fact that children of Israel could not look steadily at the face of Moses. How will the ministry of verse 8 of the Spirit not be more glorious? For if the ministry of condemnation had glory, the ministry of righteousness exceeds much more in glory. For even what was made glorious had no glory in this respect, because of the glory that excels. For if what is passing away was glorious, what remains is much more glorious. Therefore, since we have such hope, we use great boldness of speech. So now he's saying, I can be even more bold than Moses was. He says, unlike Moses, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. They knew that, he's saying, they knew that they couldn't keep the law. They knew that the law that was given would pass away. They wouldn't be able to hold on to it. Moses, we're going to see it in a minute, would cover his face because when he got into the presence of God, that glory got on him. When that glory got on him, the people would see that glory getting on him. And when people see that glory, he would hide his face. But he hid his face for a reason, according to Paul writing in Corinth. He says, verse 13, unlike Moses, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. He hid his face because the glory that was on his face wouldn't last. Put a pin in that. I'm coming for that tonight. Because I think there's some of that in our ministry and in us. But their minds were blinded, verse 14, for until this day, the same veil remains uplifted in the reading of the Old Testament because the veil is taken away in Christ. And we're going to see that in a minute. But even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil lies on the heart. Nevertheless, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. And now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord. I want to say a few things to set this up, to cue this. And I'm going to jump right to the chase, y'all. In fact, let's look at Exodus first before I do. Look at Exodus 34 real fast. Exodus chapter 34. So this is the reference to what Paul is talking about. He gives us insight in 2 Corinthians 3 that we don't have in Exodus chapter 34. In Exodus chapter 34, verse 29, he says, now it was so when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in Moses' hand when he came down from the mountain, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him, while he talked with God. So when Aaron, all the children of Israel, saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, they were afraid to come near him. And then Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned to him, and Moses talked with them. And afterward, all the children of Israel came near, and he gave them as commandments all that the Lord had spoken with him on Mount Sinai, 10 commandments. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out. And he would come out and speak to the children of Israel, whatever he had been commanded. And whenever the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, then Moses would put the veil on his face again until he went in to speak with God or to speak with him. Let me make this super simple. As long as he's interacting with God, he don't have to cover up. And as soon as he gets around people, he's got to veil himself. That sounds familiar. And Paul clarifies in 2 Corinthians. I'm trying to set this up deliberately because I want us to see where he's going. Look at verse 7, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 7. He says, the children of Israel could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance, which glory was passing away. Moses is one of my heroes in the scriptures, should be for all of us. And I'm getting ahead of my Bible study tonight. We got to be careful that when the glory on me starts slipping, that I don't try to veil myself to act like I still got what I don't have. There's sometimes a weight on us to pretend that we're better than we really are. Tonight, I liberally, this is almost like a counseling session because I want to teach about the value of getting the veil off of us, getting the mask off of us, and why this is ultimately God's goal for us. This is God's goal even for the kingdom, that I present myself flawless and faultless before him in Jesus, that God already sees me as flawless because of Jesus, that I don't have to hide who I am because in Christ the veil got lifted. So I want to walk through this and help us to understand why this is so important. So I want to say some things about veils. I want to say some things about what the old covenant couldn't do, because that's the contrast in this. And then I want to say some things about the kingdom, because this is the ultimate goal of the kingdom. And so let's set it up. Let's go. Let's go to work. First thing on your introduction I want you to see is that I want us to understand that Jesus is in the process. That first blank is restoring. Everybody say restoring. Come on, if you're on East City campus, jot that down. Jesus is in the process of restoring things to their former glory. That means he's in the process of restoring things and making them like they were before there was a fall. That I just said a mouthful. God is not trying, matter of fact, let me give you this second blank and then let me go ahead and teach the room. The second blank to this is, get letter B, that God's kingdom is a restoration movement. It bothers me, and can I teach y'all? Can y'all handle this? We're so detached from what the kingdom is. But I want our church to be mindful of what God's kingdom is. So as an example, when two churches get together, I'm gonna use Thursday as an example. This Thursday, I hope y'all come out. We're gonna have food distribution and we'll feed people. And there are gonna be people from other churches helping us. And this is what we're gonna say. What's what people will say who are not understanding. That's the kingdom. Because 10 churches work together to feed folk. Wrong. The kingdom is folk not being hungry. The kingdom is not two of us driving together to get to the hospital. The kingdom is I'm not sick no more. So God is not in the business of patching up what is wrong. God is in the business of restoring something as if it never got broken. That's kingdom. And so understand that as he's teaching us through this, he's showing us that what God is interested in is total restoration. Everybody say total restoration. He does not want to patch up my raggedy life. He wants me living in him as if I would have lived had Adam never fallen. So he wants to move me from a place where I am sinning less to I'm being delivered. So Paul writes to the church at Corinth, and as he writes to the church at Corinth, he's saying, listen, I need us thinking for a moment about the old covenant and how we view the old covenant as glorious. But if the old covenant was glorious, and it had faults, it had limitation, how much more in liberty in Christ will we gain? This is the argument that he makes. Let me pause here for a moment. I want to say a couple things about this before I even move on down the sheet. If you look at the text again, he says, if the ministry of death written and engraved on stones was glorious so the children of Israel could not look steadily, everybody say look steadily. That literally is the Greek word beholding, who could not behold the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance, which glory was passing away. Let me tell you what he's saying. He's saying that movement in Christ, movement toward deliverance, is not a come to church one time, get one word from God moment. It is a deliberate, intentional beholding of what God is doing. That's a different level. That's a different, everybody say intensity. What he's saying is that I have to deliberately reflect upon what God is doing. I need to be able to think deeply on what God has done. It's not simply gazing at something. These were, the children of Israel were beholding. They weren't just glimpsing. They weren't just simply gazing. They were trying to capture the full attention of something. Let me spend a moment on this because I want us to get the value of if you can get what I'm about to say, I think this is going to be life-changing. If I really want God to do something, I'm talking about who other than me has an area of your life that you don't want God to just patch up. You want God that when he gets done with it, it's going to totally be what it was going to be had it never fallen to begin with. So I'm not the only one, right? Right. So if I'm not the only one, the issue becomes, how do I get there? The way I get there is that I've got to give thoughtful reflection upon what it really means for God to fully have his way in my life. I need to spend some time just sitting and reflecting. God, if you would fully restore or transform or change my life, what would that look like for my family? How does that play out with my job every day? I'm saying more than y'all realize. What does it mean for me to accept my part of what you want to do? See, deep down inside, we know God can do anything. The problem I have, that I think many of you can have, is that in order for him to do anything, it requires a higher level of commitment and sacrifice on my part. So it's not that he doesn't want to totally change me. It's that I don't want to give him the part of me necessary for him to do it. My God. So he says, if the Old Testament with the law had all of these limitations and it was glorious, how much more the liberty we have in Jesus? So the first thing I want you to see is that understanding that this is God's desire for total, look at somebody, tell them God's desire for you, total restoration. I'm learning, y'all, in order for me to believe strongly in what he can do, I've got to learn deeply what he says in his word. So let me say a couple more things. I'm cueing this for the first 20 minutes. Let me cue this with letter C now. That means I must believe and understand that God loves me apart from my performance. So I don't have to perform for anybody. I mean, I can be real with this thing. Because God is unimpressed with my performance. So he says, I don't have to play the hits with anybody. Right? Because apart from all of this, this is where, go back to Moses. I'm trying not to get ahead of my teaching. But Moses is like, I don't know that y'all, he hangs out with God. Understand what happens. He hangs out with God. So much glory off of God that just because Moses is in his presence, he got like a suntan. His face is like, he's shiny. He comes down off the Mount Sinai. Folk are like, you glowing, dude. You got a glow on your face. They feel uncomfortable, so he veils himself. Now understand what the text teaches. He doesn't just unveil himself because they are concerned about his glow. He's concerned because he knows the glow won't last. So because they can't, even if they could keep the law temporarily, they can't keep it permanently. So in a very real way, Moses is like, I'm going to veil myself so you can't see really what's going on with me. Now, he was doing it as a way to protect them. But he was saying, I don't want you to see what I look like with you. So I'm going to act like I'm something I'm not, just so you can continue to feel comfortable with me. This is life-changing. Tonight, masks are going to come off. That I don't need to come to church or to work, or especially not at home, veiling who I really am and what's really going on in my life, just simply because I am concerned that the people that witness me for my authentic self won't accept me anymore for that person. That I gotta be willing to be fully unveiled. And I'm gonna prove it to you in the scriptures tonight. Let me say a few more things to cue this. He makes 3 statements then about the old covenant. The first statement he makes about the old covenant is that the old covenant, or this issue of veiling when he brings the commandments down, is this letter D on your handout. The old covenant was not life-giving. That's why he says in verses 3 and then again in verse 6. In verse 6 he says, who also made us sufficient as ministers of the new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. He says, so the law, all it does is kill. It doesn't give you life. So even when I'm dotting I's and crossing T's, I don't have life. Let me tell you why I don't have life, and I'm going to show it to you in the handout in a minute. I still don't have life when I'm doing all that, because at the end of the day, it's the Spirit of God that gives life. It is not the fact that I did something right that gives me life. No. What kind of condition would we be in? Let me give you the other 2, and then I'll minister them as a trio. The old covenant was not life-giving. Letter E, the old covenant was not lasting. Unlike Moses, verse 13, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what, everybody say, passing away. He says, what I was doing won't last. So be careful when I'm bragging about all this law keeping I'm doing. You know, sometimes we can do good for a couple weeks. Come on, be honest, don't. Come on, there's some stuff we claim we got. The right scenario rises up. And that which I thought I had total control of suddenly proves, come on, who am I talking to, has control of me. You know, you can claim I got victory over that cussing spirit, and you may very well. But when the right person knows how to push the right button on the right day at the right time, that which I thought I had full victory over, all I can do is testify the old covenant was just temporary. I got to start all over again. So he says, there's a glorious side of the old covenant, he says, but the liberty of grace in Jesus is far more glorious, because in him we have something lasting. In him we have something life-giving. The letter kills. Spirit gives life. But here's the third thing. Letter F, the old covenant was not liberating. That's why in verse 17 he says, the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, not where the law is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. Now here's our conundrum. Our conundrum, our fly in the ointment, where we get stuck, is that in order for me to experience all this, I have to take off my mask. So let me say something that I hope will liberate the room. This is letter G. The greatest risk I will ever take is to be known. Wow. This is a grown-up Bible study tonight, y'all. Most of us are afraid to risk folk knowing us. Are y'all fully able to handle this? Y'all probably not. Why do you think people that may be in a certain place sexually, it's referred to them as them being in a closet? Because they won't even risk to their parents being fully known. Can I pause here and say this to everybody in the room? This is why you must be saved. Let me give you this last introduction, and I'm going to tell you why you had to be saved. I can only be loved to the extent that I am known, and can only be fully loved if I am completely known. Ooh, ooh, ooh. So let me help you understand something. Nobody completely loves us because nobody fully knows us. Y'all not. There's something, as much as you can try all you want. When you finally meet your perfect boo, you can try all you want to sit down and walk them through all your stuff. Let me tell you something I know about all of us, especially me. We've all done something so vile, so wretched, that we have now convinced ourselves it never happened, and we got it hidden way back in the recesses of our mind. So if I were to tell you everything about me, I would never bring that up because I made myself forget it. So nobody fully loves you because nobody fully knows you. But there is somebody that made me and knew me when I was in my mother's womb. And he knows every thought, every flaw, every failure, every hiccup, every mistake, every sin, every lie, every cuss. He knows everything. And he says, I love you. Oh, God. And so that's why Paul writes, and he says, when I get in front of God, I don't need no veil. When I get in front of you, you can't handle everything there is to know about me. And you can't handle the fact that I'm not quite as saved as you thought I was. You can't handle the fact that my glow is temporary. You can't handle the fact that I'm not always equally anointed. So when I get in front of you, so God is saying, take the mask off. Tell them, take the mask off. And so tonight, I don't have a deep Bible study. I just have, it's time to take off the mask. Because let me tell you what you're thinking. I'm afraid to take off the mask because you just said, Pastor, that I take a risk. Because if somebody knows me, they may not, you said it. If they really know me, they're going to look for another pastor. If they really know me, they're going to be like, I didn't know. I know you had that on your record. And I want to encourage you that I won't ever live free. Because where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. And I won't ever live free until I can learn to stand before people without my veil. And that's what I want to hone in on tonight, our ability to do this. And I want to talk about a few areas we have to unveil. And I want to show you scripturally why this is so important. And so let's walk them through real quick. And now let me just say, everybody can't handle you in all your nakedness. Everybody's not, don't rip it off too quick now. We need a little time. Be careful. But there is some unveiling I need to do. Here's my first one. I'm going to teach through about 4 of them, and I'm going to stop right at 8 o'clock, and then we're going to pray for 5 minutes that the Lord begins to do this work in us. First of all, I want to unveil my fights. I want to unveil my fights. I want to unveil the stuff I struggle with. I want to stop acting like I'm not struggling with what I'm struggling with. I think we make other people suicidal. I think we make other people depressed. I think we drive other people to medication. I think we drive other people to get more counseling because every time they see you, they think something's wrong with them because you always act like you have it all put together and have it all together. And it doesn't ever appear to be a struggle at all in anything. We've got to learn to unveil the struggles. And I want to say this, husbands and wives, consider the free counseling session. People that do ministry together, consider the free counseling session. I'm not talking about strangers. I'm talking about people that I claim are close. And yet, I never really have a real conversation with them without my mask on. Like if I already know you can't handle me without my mask, you're probably not worth the time we're spending in the conversation now to begin with. That wouldn't it be better if we could just help me out here, Phil, a little bit? Wouldn't it be better if I could just spend time with people that I know can handle me without my mask? So I want to unveil my struggles and my fights. I'm not here to tell you what they are. You could be, you in a group with brothers. I use that as an example. And they talking about pornography. And then you acting like it's no big deal, but you deep down struggling with it. You wouldn't want none of us going back through the history on your computer. I need y'all to hear this. This Bible study is not in judgment and condemnation. Help us. This Bible study is simply to see that there are areas in my life that I'm veiling. And that in the New Testament, because of the liberty of grace in Christ, I no longer have to remain veiled. That's what I'm trying to get you to see. Are y'all here? Y'all following me? Now let me say a few things about this unveiling my fights. The first thing I want you to see, remember what I said in the beginning, in the introduction. In the beginning, I said the biggest risk I'm ever going to take is being known. That's my biggest risk. It really is your biggest risk, mine too. So I want to keep following that line of thought as we walk through these areas that we need to unveil. Letter A here is, I must risk rejection in order to find acceptance. Wow. Y'all acting like you're not following me, but I think I'm teaching pretty good here. If y'all see, here's the issue. Until I can unveil with you, I'll never really know if you'll ever accept me. Because who you have accepted is somebody you don't know. So I want to risk you accepting me. I want to run the risk of that by just saying, here's what I'm struggling with. And when I tell you this is what I'm struggling with, you might say deuces. Wow. But at least that's over with. Because the greater bondage, I want you to get this in your spirit. The greater bondage is not my association with people who have rejected me for who I really am. The greater bondage is for people who have accepted me for who they thought I was. Let me tell you why that's the greater bondage. Because if you accept me for who you thought I was, then every time I'm around you, I have to make sure I keep from you the real me. And then I wonder why, when I leave you, I'm so tired. And the reason I'm so tired is because the whole time we've been together, I've been fighting who I really am. So I can't even really pay attention to what you're saying and what I can't even enjoy the movie because I'm afraid I might laugh at something that you didn't think I thought was funny. So I've got to risk the rejection. Moses was unwilling to risk the rejection. So he kept covering himself every time he went back to the people. Let me say something else about this. The other part of this is I have to risk, good Lord, this might be my best point for tonight. I have to risk letting others see me fade. I'm right there in the text. He says, they could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance, which glory was passing away. Wow. We don't want to just be around folk when we're having a good day. We need to show each other when we're fading. It's been a couple years now. If you just Google James Gailliard hitting the wall. I've been pastoring 24 years. The single most popular video ever released about me was my admission of fading. Not preaching a good sermon on Sunday. Me sitting on a stool, taking the mask off, saying, I'm not as bright as I used to be. And it's quiet in the room. What we do is we start fading and we stay away. We can't keep you out the church as long as you and your wife happy. Somebody cheated, now he ain't been home for 3 months, you ain't nowhere to be found. Because as long as I had it going on, I wanted everybody to see me. But I can't show up in church letting you see me fade. And I want to encourage us that you don't have to run when you're fading. I would argue that you might preach better fading. You might sing better fading. There might be a humility attached to what God is doing in your life when I can do it while I'm fading. So let me say a few things that we do, because you're probably wondering, well, what does the mask look like? Let me give you a couple examples of masks we wear when we don't want to risk people seeing us for who we really are. Sometimes we're wearing the mask of humor. Sometimes we're acting like everything is funny as a way of hiding the fact that I'm really crying on the inside. Everybody shout, take off the mask. Sometimes it's the mask of spirituality. How you feeling today? Oh, praise the Lord, highly favored and blessed of the Lord. When's the last time? Honestly, when's the last time somebody say, how you doing? And you're like, I feel like smacking somebody is how I'm doing. But we don't want them to see that side of us. I'm good. No, you're not good. But I put on that mask because I'm afraid you might not want me to minister if you knew I was ready to lay hands. mask of success, where I'm always flaunting every win.
My God.
Most of our social media is one big mask. I mean, if you're going to post all made up, post not made up. What am I afraid of? That I'm going to lose followers if they really knew what I look like? Mass of intellect, where we are always in promotion of how much we know. I'm just simply saying it's time that I unveil my fights. Let me say one more thing about this. Deep relationships are like scales in that they reveal a lot. You ever, let me teach the room. The most shallow part of me and you is our bodies. That's why we're gonna lose them. They just don't have much value. The only value they have now is that they house the Holy Spirit. The moment, I need y'all to get this revelation. The only reason my body has value is because it houses the Holy Spirit. The moment God comes for the Spirit, that body is put in the ground. It no longer has any value. Now I'm going somewhere I want y'all to get. We are body, soul, spirit. We are triune beings. The shallow, least valuable part of me is my body. My spirit is the highest part of me, followed by my soul, which houses my intellect, my will, and my emotion. The church is not a focus orientation on our bodies. Most relationships are interaction with the body, which is not much. You ever heard people talk about why church hurts the most? The reason is because we engage with each other at the highest level. We doing soul and spirit stuff. This is not no shallow stuff. People you work with, that's usually spirit body stuff. Here is higher level engagement. So here, when our relationships get put on the scale, it reveals more about me. See, when I get called on the scale in here, it doesn't tell me I'm overweight or underweight. It tells me I don't have the fruit of the Spirit. It tells me I'm operating in my flesh. It tells me I'm not all I claimed I was. And so what happens is folk have a tendency to leave environments where the scales tell on them. If you are serious about having a real relationship, scale is going to tell on you. And that's what he's teaching us, family. I've got to have the ability to unveil my fights. Secondly, I have to have the ability to unveil my feelings. Ooh. In order for me, this is on your note sheet, in order for us to have true intimacy, I have to first have conflict with you. I'm about to shock y'all. Let me sit down on this one. You show me a person you've never had conflict with, and I'll show you someone you've not had true intimacy with. You don't really know what you have in somebody till y'all disagree. You don't really know until you share how you feel. And this is hard for us as men because we sometimes don't want to share how we feel. Let me give you a free counseling moment for couples on letter B. Anybody that wants to be in a couple. You want to be in a relationship, remember what I'm about to tell you, letter B. Until you unveil your soul, you can't become soulmates. So until you unveil your intellect, your will, your emotions, y'all not soulmates. That's why it's too many people running around with somebody other than their spouse as their best friend.
Yes, Pastor, help us. Come on.
I'm not scared of y'all. I'm going to go ahead and say it. If any human being is a better friend to you than your spouse, you are cheating. I don't care if it's a romance, a bromance, or whatever it is. At the end of the day, if you want a soul tie, you got to share your soul. So when it's all that, you sitting on the sideline, I can't really tell them how you feel. Y'all about to get divorced. Because I might as well, I'm out the gate now, so what the heck? Because know this. If they can't tell you how they feel, they telling somebody. And whoever they telling in one way or another, they coming for your man. Are y'all following me out here? Y'all don't believe me? I got Bible for you. Let me give y'all Bible because y'all think this just being emotionalism. Is not. I'm trying to help us understand the value of these veils, the danger of them. Get ready for this. Home is where I unveil. Somebody. I don't know if other people are like me. Whenever I travel, I'm not one of them people when I get to the hotel, I don't open up my suitcase, take all my stuff out, hang it up on the closet, put it in the, I just live out my suitcase. It just like, first thing I do is I go into the bathroom and I take that teeny little plastic bag out the trash can. I jack the hotel's trash bag. First thing I do, I'm just unveiling. And then I put my dirty clothes in that bag. And I keep that in the side of my suitcase. And the reason, this is me, I have no interest in getting comfortable anywhere that I know I'm not home. So, and all I'm trying to get you to see is that if you go home and you keep the veil on, but you can go somewhere else, it could be work, and you can talk to a coworker in a way that you can't talk to your spouse, then that job winds up being more a home. And now you're wondering why they working overtime. Because they need extra time not to work, but extra time to take the veil off before they get back home to you to put it back on. Genesis chapter 2, verse 25. I have to hurry up because now I'm at 8 o'clock and I need to hurry up. Genesis 2:25. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. they were both unveiled. And they were fine. Now, that's before sin. That's why God is always trying to take us back to what mankind looked like before the fall. And before the fall, people that were close did not veil themselves against each other. Now look at chapter 3. We done had the fall now. Then the eyes of both of them, this is chapter 3, verse 7. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves and made themselves coverings. Notice the difference between before the fall and after the fall. Before, I don't have to be veiled with you. I don't have to be covered. After the fall, we're covering ourselves in front of each other. That's why anything that you and I are really serious about being in authentic relationship with other people, it could be romantically, it could be friendship. It cannot be a relationship of cover-ups. Y'all, Lord, I'm going to say it because it's in my spirit to say. If they leave you because you told it, then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I am telling you, if you have to live a life of being a fake who you really are for the hope of them staying with you, then they're already with you for a lie anyway. And you're better off just being honest about who I really am. All right, let me hurry up. So that means then when I'm unveiling my feelings, I must risk awkwardness so I can find true unity. Wow. I got to risk awkwardness. It's going to be awkward. God, this is such a good Bible study. It's going to be awkward having this conversation with you, letting you know how I really feel about this chick I work with, but I got to get it out. And you're not going to want to sleep with me right now, but we got to work it on out. I got to work it out because we won't ever really be together as long as we have that between us. And so feelings like anger and resentment and discouragement, the Lord put this word in my spirit. I didn't know that he was going to let me teach it, but evidently he wants me to. So I was like, God, I want to understand discouragement, and this is what I jotted down. He says, all of us, this is going to be a word of knowledge for somebody. All of us have personal limitations that if we're not careful can catch up to us. So I said, God, what are the personal limitations? He gave me 3 things. He said, son, it's a formula. And when these things work together the right way, it's going to expose your limitation. And it's going to discourage you. I said, what are the 3 things, God? He says, time, pressure, and energy. Time, pressure, and energy. He says, if you start using too much of your time under enough pressure that's using enough of your energy, it's going to expose your limitation. So I got to protect myself from what stresses me. I need to protect myself from what pressures me. I need to protect myself from what exposes my energy. So I've got to unveil my feelings. I got to be honest with folk. Like I can't run with you because you wipe me out. You nice person, good people, but we have a conversation. I'm tired. So we can't talk every day. It's going to have to be once or twice a week because I have a limitation. Love you, think you wonderful people. Amen, Pastor. And then after I unveil my feelings, I have to unveil my faults. Faults are things like, I'm going to teach the rest of this quick, arrogance, negativity, impatience, a lack of empathy. I have to be willing. It's not fair for me to make you guess about me. If you already know you're impatient, then clue me in. So I won't have to wind up being hurt. If you're already cold in your spirit, tell me. Some of y'all need to clue me in. Pastor, I don't smile in church. Tell me. Have me wondering if I'm teaching all right. And then I've got to unveil my fears. That's the last one. Things like, I'm fearful of being left alone. I'm fearful of failing. I'm fearful of being rejected. I'm fearful of being proven inadequate. I'm fearful of being broke one day and struggling financially. And so I want us to grapple in prayer as we get ready to go home. Here's your last two blanks. Go to Matthew chapter 27, verse 50. Now, when you read it, you're going to read this. This is a passage of scripture you know. But based on tonight's teaching, it's going to mean something a little different. It's really verse 51. It's going to mean something totally different tonight now. You're going to shout when you read it. So let me give you the blank. Write down the word Jesus. Only Jesus can get rid of my veils. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, yielded up his spirit, and then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split. Jesus dies on a cross so our veils can be ripped. And so, Pastor, when the glory fades, what happens? When the glory in our life begins to fade, this is what I want to encourage you about and what Paul teaches us. Grace prevails. Thank God for grace. Thank God for grace.